History is filled with tales of survival. This is one of those stories. A story of courage, brotherhood, and the unbreakable human spirit. It begins in the kingdom of Tonga in the South Pacific. The ocean provides, but it can also take away. 6 young boys were about to learn this lesson. In 1965, 6 students from a Catholic boarding school in Nuku'alofa felt the pull of adventure. They were tired of the school's rules and dreamt of freedom. This desire for adventure would set in motion a chain of events no one could have predicted. It was a dream that would turn into a terrifying nightmare. There were no mobile phones, no GPS devices, no easy way to call for help. Against all odds, they were about to write a new chapter in the history of human survival. The plan was simple, perhaps dangerously so. The boys decided to borrow a boat. They found a small 24-foot fishing boat belonging to a local fisherman named Tanyela Uhila, a man they all disliked. Without a second thought, they made their move under the cover of darkness. They packed, minimally, taking just 2 sacks of bananas, a few coconuts, and a small gas burner. They had no map. They had no compass. Their only guide was the vast, unforgiving expanse of the Pacific Ocean. They believed their adventure would be a short one, a quick trip to a nearby island and then, somehow, on to Fiji. Their excitement was palpable as they pushed the small boat out into the dark water. The initial journey was calm, and the thrill of their escape filled the air. They were free. The stars above seemed to guide them towards their dream destination. But their lack of experience soon became a critical problem. They hadn't checked the weather. They hadn't considered the power of the ocean. As night deepened, they fell asleep, content in their newfound freedom. They awoke to a terrifying reality. A fierce storm had descended upon them, trapping them in its violent grip. The wind howled, and the waves crashed over their small vessel, mercilessly tossing it about like a toy. Their meager supplies of food and water were washed overboard. The sail was torn to shreds by the ferocious gale, and their rudder was shattered, leaving them completely at the mercy of the storm. For 8 terrifying days they drifted. They were lost, starving, and dehydrated. The sun beat down on them during the day, and the cold chilled them to the bone at night. Hope began to fade, replaced by a gnawing fear and the grim realization that their adventure had turned into a desperate fight for life. Just as they were about to give up, on the 8th day of their ordeal, a miracle appeared on the horizon. Through the haze of exhaustion and despair, they saw land. It was a small, rugged island, a smudge of green and gray against the endless blue. It was the island of Ata. Uninhabited for over a century, it was a place of jagged cliffs and dense, untamed jungle. It was not the paradise of Fiji they had dreamt of, but it was land. It was a chance. With their last ounce of strength, they swam towards the shore, their bodies battered, their spirits broken, but a tiny flicker of hope reignited within them. They had survived the ocean, but a new trial was about to begin. The waves crashed against the shore as the 6 exhausted boys threw themselves from the splintered remains of their boat into the churning surf. Weak from hunger and thirst, each wave threatened to drag them back to the unforgiving sea. One by one, they dragged themselves onto the rocky beach, collapsing, their bodies scraped and bruised. They were alive. They had reached land. Sione, the oldest, scanned the strange new landscape. Before them lay a wall of dense, dark green jungle. They were utterly alone, marooned on an island that appeared on no map. They had nothing but the torn clothes on their backs and the fading strength in their bodies. The island now looked like a formidable green fortress, and they were the unwilling prisoners within its walls. first sunset on Arta was a stark lesson in despair. The first few days were a blur. The boys' initial attempts at survival were clumsy and fruitless. They tried to eat raw fish, but it made them sick. Their bodies, already weakened, began to fail them. Hunger was a constant ache. Thirst was an even greater torment. Despair began to take root. The initial pact of unity started to fray. Arguments broke out. It was easier to lash out than to confront the terrifying reality that they might die. The island itself seemed to mock their efforts. The boys felt like they were in a cage, a beautiful but deadly prison. But the horizon remained stubbornly empty. It seemed as if their story was destined to end here, on this remote, forgotten island. On the brink of despair, Kolo and David's argument faded. In a silent moment, they recognized each other as brothers, not adversaries. Sione gathered everyone. He spoke of their old friendship and proposed a pact. From now on, they'd work as a team, share everything, and never let anger divide them. They set a rule: teamwork. 2 on lookout, 2 searching for food, 2 tending camp. This structure brought order and hope. That evening, they prayed and sang together, their voices weak but united. The pact became their foundation, transforming 6 scared boys into a resilient unit. The island was still a prison, but now they had a plan. Their brotherhood, reforged in hardship, was their first true tool for survival. As darkness fell, hope quietly returned. The pact would shape everything that followed. Weeks passed. Thirst gnawed at them, hope fading. Then at their lowest, rain came. First a drop, then a torrent. The boys rejoiced, drinking from cupped hands and coconut shells, letting the rain revive their bodies and spirits. The downpour was more than water. It was a sign the island could provide. Pools formed, the air cleared, and despair washed away. They felt renewed, ready to face new challenges. Survival was now possible. They had endured the sea, conflict, and thirst. Now they were ready to truly live. With water secured, the boys turned to shelter. Drawing on memories from Tonga, they built a hut with bare hands and sharp rocks. Luke led the construction, teaching them to weave branches and thatch palm fronds. The work was grueling, but their teamwork never faltered. When the hut was finished, it felt like a palace, a sanctuary from the wild. Building shelter changed everything. They were no longer victims, but creators. The hut marked a new phase: stability, pride, and a sense of home. They shaped their world, not just survived it. The island felt less like a prison, more like a place they could endure. Their home was proof of what unity could achieve. With shelter and water, food became the focus. They crafted fishing spears, learned to catch fish, and gathered eggs from seabirds. Wild taro and chickens added to their diet, a taste of home. Kolo's fire-making skills brought warmth and safety. The fire became their gathering place, a symbol of community. Their days found rhythm: hunting, cooking, sharing stories. They respected the island, taking only what they needed. No longer starving castaways, they became resourceful survivors. The island, once a prison, now provided for them. Routines evolved into a miniature society. Sione led by consensus, Kolo managed food. Stephen cared for spirits. Duties rotated: gardening, fishing, camp chores, firekeeping. Arguments were settled with time apart, preserving harmony. Their organization ensured survival and mutual respect. Each boy's role was vital. They depended on one another. They created rules, a work schedule, even a system for resolving conflict. Friends became citizens of a tiny nation. Against all odds, they built a functioning civilization. On a forgotten island, they proved what unity could achieve. Months passed. Life found rhythm, but hope for rescue never faded. The lookout was sacred, one boy always scanning the horizon. To stay strong, they built a gym, played games, and laughed together. Stephen led daily prayers and songs, their voices rising over the sea. He even made a guitar from driftwood and wire, filling nights with music. These rituals anchored them, blending routine with resilience. The fire was their beacon, never allowed to die. Every day they believed a ship would come. Their hope was as constant as the flame they guarded. In darkness, their unity and hope burned brightest. Life on the island had settled, but the Pacific Ocean is a fickle master. One afternoon, the sky began to change. The familiar blue was swallowed by a menacing gray. The wind began to pick up, whipping through the trees. A powerful storm was bearing down on them. They scrambled to secure their camp, reinforcing their hut. As the first drops of rain began to fall, they huddled together. The storm hit with full force. The wind shrieked, and the rain came down in solid sheets. Thunder cracked overhead. The night was an eternity of terror. When dawn finally broke, it revealed a scene of utter devastation. The storm had passed, leaving a trail of destruction. Their hut, miraculously, was still standing. Looking at the wreckage, a wave of despair washed over them. They had to start again. In the aftermath of the storm, the boys' spirits were low. The destruction was overwhelming. Their food garden was completely gone. It felt as if the island itself had turned against them. Doubt and despair crept back into their hearts. Their faith was hanging by a thread. Stephen reminded them that they had faced hardship before and triumphed. The storm was a test, not a punishment. He insisted they continue their prayers and hymns. Slowly, rebuilding began to heal their spirits. They rediscovered their sense of purpose. They learned a valuable lesson in resilience. In overcoming the storm, their bond became even stronger. For months, the boys had enjoyed remarkable health, but their ordeal was taking a toll. The first sign of trouble came when Mano developed a persistent cough. He grew weak, his breathing became labored, and a fever took hold. They had no medicine, no doctors, no real knowledge of how to treat it. The other boys watched over Mano helplessly. They tried to coax him to drink broth and herbs. Stephen became Mano's dedicated nurse. He organized the other boys to search the island for plants and roots. Miraculously, Mano's fever finally broke. The collective sigh of relief in the camp was almost palpable. It was a stark reminder of their isolation. They realized that their health was their most precious resource. They had faced the shadow of sickness, and through teamwork had emerged into the light. The daily hunt was always fraught with risk. The boys had become agile, but carelessness could lead to disaster. One afternoon, Stephen, showing off, decided to leap between rocks. He misjudged the distance, his foot slipped, and he fell. A sharp crack echoed, followed by a cry of agony. His leg was broken. A broken leg was potentially fatal. They had nothing but their own ingenuity. Sione, taking charge, remembered his father setting a horse's broken leg. They had to try and set the bone themselves. With Kolo and David holding Stephen, Sione pulled on his leg until the bone slipped back into place. Stephen screamed before passing out from the pain. They fashioned a splint and bound it to his leg. They carried him back to the hut. The long process of healing had begun. For the next 4 months, the other boys became Stephen's carers. This accident solidified their bond. They were a family, and they would leave no one behind. As days turned into weeks and weeks into months, the psychological weight of the long wait settled upon the boys. The initial adrenaline faded, replaced by a monotonous routine. They had conquered the island, but they were still prisoners. With each passing day, the flame of hope for rescue flickered. They had been on the island for over a year. Despondency was a constant threat, and the lookout duty became the hardest task. They fought the feeling that they had been forgotten. To combat this, they clung to routines with fierce determination. These rituals were a bulwark against despair. They talked about what they would do when rescued, a conscious act of keeping hope alive. The fire became the ultimate symbol of their endurance. As long as the fire burned, their hope burned with it. As long as the fire glowed, they would continue to endure. 15 months, over 460 days. The boys had endured more than they ever thought possible. They had survived storms, sickness, and even a broken bone. They had tamed a wild island and built a life for themselves. But the long, monotonous wait was really taking its toll. Hope, once a roaring fire, had dwindled to a fragile ember, carefully shielded from the winds of despair. The lookout duty continued, more out of habit than genuine expectation. The horizon had been empty for so long that it felt like a permanent, unchangeable feature of their world. They were beginning to resign themselves to the idea that this island might be their home for the rest of their lives. Then, on Sunday, 11th of September, 1966, something changed. It was Kolo's turn on lookout duty. He sat on the high cliff, his eyes scanning the familiar empty expanse of blue. Suddenly, something caught his eye. It was a tiny glint, a flash of light where there should have been nothing but waves. He blinked, thinking it was a trick of the sun, a figment of his imagination. He had seen mirages before. He had mistaken dolphins for boats. He did not dare to hope. He stared intently, his heart beginning to pound in his chest. The glint appeared again. It was clearer this time. It was not a wave. It was not a fish. It was moving. It was a boat. Kolo's breath caught in his throat. He could not believe what he was seeing. For a full minute he was frozen, paralyzed by a mixture of shock and disbelief. Then a surge of adrenaline just coursed through him. He screamed, "A boat! A boat!" His voice, raw with emotion, echoed across the island. The other boys, hearing the cry, dropped what they were doing and sprinted towards the beach. They all saw it. A small fishing vessel chugging slowly along the coastline. It was real. After 15 long months of isolation, salvation had appeared. Panic and euphoria erupted. They ran to their signal fire, piling on green leaves to create a thick column of smoke. They shouted. They waved their arms. They did everything they could to attract the boat's attention. Stephen threw himself into the waves and began swimming desperately towards the vessel. This was their one chance. They could not let it slip away. Peter Warner, an Australian fisherman, sailed the South Pacific in his boat, the Just David. Near the remote island of Arta, he noticed unusual burnt patches on the cliffs. Scanning the coastline, he saw a naked boy diving from the cliffs and swimming towards his boat. He had been told Arta was deserted. Then he saw 5 more boys waving from the shore. The boy, Stephen, reached the boat gasping and said, "There are 6 of us, we are students." Peter realized they were the Tongan schoolboys declared dead a year ago. He put down his rifle, filled with compassion, and helped Stephen aboard. As the boys clambered onto the deck, they were overwhelmed and safe. Tears of relief streamed down their faces. They were going home. The journey back to Nuku'alofa took several hours. Peter Warner gave the boys water and a simple meal. They told him their story, explaining how they had organized themselves, built their hut, found food, and kept their fire burning. Peter listened in stunned silence, his admiration growing. He was rescuing 6 heroes. As the boat approached the harbor, Peter radioed the authorities. As the boat docked, a crowd gathered. When the 6 boys walked down the gangplank, a wave of stunned silence fell over the crowd, followed by cries of disbelief and joy. The reunions were complex and emotionally fraught. The parents could not process what they were seeing. The boys were immediately taken to the hospital. The doctors were astonished at their good health, but the owner of the boat had them arrested and thrown in jail. It seemed a final, bitter irony to their incredible story. adventure, just not in the way they had ever expected. The story of 6 Tongan boys stands as a counter-narrative to William Golding's Lord of the Flies. In that fictional account, stranded schoolboys descend into savagery. But the true story of the boys on Alta Island offers a more hopeful perspective. Unlike their fictional counterparts, they forged a pact of brotherhood and cooperation. The Tongan boys worked together to hunt for food. They guarded their flame for 15 months as their most sacred symbol of hope. Their real-life experience suggests that our deepest instinct is not for conflict, but for community. They were raised with interdependence, faith, and mutual respect. Civilization can be built from within, nurtured by friendship and empathy. The tale of the Tongan castaways serves as a vital, real-world lesson. They are the real Lord of the Flies, a powerful rebuttal to its pessimistic worldview. Their story proves that our better angels can prevail. The legacy of the Tongan castaways extends far beyond their incredible feat of survival. Their story is a timeless and universal testament to the resilience of the human spirit. It speaks to the extraordinary capacity within ordinary people to face unimaginable adversity and not only endure, but also create something positive and meaningful. These 6 boys, with no tools and no training, transformed their desolate prison into a thriving home. They found order in chaos, purpose in despair, and brotherhood in isolation. Their journey reminds us that our ability to adapt, innovate, and care for one another is our greatest strength as a species. Their adventure teaches us profound lessons about what truly matters. In our modern world, we often measure success by wealth, status, or individual achievement. The boys on Arta, stripped of everything, rediscovered a more fundamental truth. They learned that true wealth lies in community, that true strength lies in unity, and that true hope is found in shared faith. Their makeshift society, with its garden, its gym, its roster, and its evening songs, was a masterclass in living with purpose and dignity. They remind us that even when we have nothing, we can find everything we need in the bonds we forge with others. The story of Sione, Stephen, Kolo, David, Luke, and Mano is a call to action for all of us. It challenges us to look at the islands in our own lives, the challenges, the hardships, the moments of isolation, and to face them not with fear, but with courage and cooperation. It asks us to believe in the good of others and to build communities based on trust and mutual support. Their experience shows that when we work together, when we refuse to let go of hope, there is no storm we cannot weather, no obstacle we cannot overcome. The human spirit, when bound together in friendship, is truly unbreakable. Their tale is not just a historical event, it is an enduring source of inspiration. It shows us what humanity is capable of at its very best. It is a story of how 6 young boys, lost at sea, found not savagery and despair, but the very best parts of themselves. They did not just wait for rescue. They built a world worthy of it. Their journey proves that the greatest adventures are not about the destinations we seek, but about the character we build along the way. Real heroes don't wear capes. They build homes from scratch. Subscribe for real stories.